The film opens up with the scene of a young couple getting intimate with one another. Afterwards, the two of them go for a drive, when the young man named Bennett tells his girlfriend that he is in love with her. But before he can continue, their vehicle is struck by an oncoming truck. The scene cuts to a middle-aged man sitting in his bed, as the alarm rings and his wife awakes, and then immediately breaks down crying. These two people are Bennett's parents, and they later attend Bennett's funeral, as he didn't survive the accident. At the funeral, Bennett's father Alan spots Rose in the distance, who has her arm in a cast. During the ride back home, Alan is sat between his wife and younger son, trying to be strong, but ends up shedding tears for the son he has just had to bury. The next morning, Alan is sitting in bed again, and when the alarm clock rings, his wife Grace awakens and again breaks down in tears. Alan does not react, but gets out of bed and heads into his younger son Ryan's room, where he notes how bad his son's room smells. Meanwhile, Grace visits her son's doctor at the hospital. The doctor isn't particularly pleased to see Grace, as he states that she's been visiting the hospital every day since the accident, and has tried to speak to everyone that treated her son, including the firemen that got him out of the wreckage. Grace inquires about the status of the man whose truck collided with Bennett's car, and is informed that the man in question is in a coma. She asks the doctor if it is possible that the man spoke to her son before he lost consciousness, as she has found CCTV footage that suggests that may be the case. The doctor states that it is a possibility, but he doesn't know for certain, so is unable to confirm whether that is true or not. Grace asks the doctor when the man could wake up. However, the doctor apologizes and walks away without answering her question. Elsewhere, Alan is back at work, where he is a maths professor at a college. A co-worker named Joan attempts to comfort him, asking him if there is anything she can do for him. Alan is grateful, but it is obvious that he is still in much pain, and he replies that he's trying to stay strong for Grace. Joan asks him to come to her if he needs anything and exits the room. When he gets home, Alan finds his wife in the bath. He takes a seat and reveals to her a bell, asking her that either of them can ring it when they're missing their son. Grace is unimpressed, asks for the bell, and continuously keeps ringing it as she stares off into space while in the bath. Later, still listening to his wife ringing the bell whilst in the bath, Alan answers the door and is surprised to see Rose standing there. Alan doesn't know Rose too well, but knows her name, so he invites her inside. The two of them sit in the living room, where Alan asks Rose how she knew his son. Rose doesn't hesitate. She reveals to Alan that Bennett got her pregnant, and that she plans to keep the child. Alan is shocked at the revelation, unsure what to say next. Alan discusses the situation with Grace in their room, and his wife is far less welcoming to Rose than himself, even doubting if the baby is Bennett's at all. She suggests that they wait for a paternity test until they make a decision on Rose, who has nowhere to go. However, Alan is firmly against it, not wanting to put the young woman through such a stressful experience when she too is grieving. Later that day, Rose is cleaning the spare room she has been allowed to stay in when she meets Ryan. She asks him if he is Bennett's younger brother, which he confirms. He asks her if his brother ever spoke of him, and how much of a failure he is, which Rose denies. She then feels his forehead, much to Ryan's surprise, and asks him to drink Gatorade and eat fruit as he has a fever. Later that night, Rose sneaks into Bennett's old room and takes out the picture of Bennett and herself from his bedside cabinet. She remembers a moment she shared with Bennett when they were together. As the two of them were lying in bed together, he asked her what she was thinking, and she whispered in his ear that she thought he was the greatest. Bennett stated that he liked her words, though he wore an expression of unhappiness. Just then, Rose spots a baseball trophy that Bennett won when he was younger, before she is startled by Grace's yelling. Grace is having a mental breakdown, looking for her baby that she supposedly lost. Alan, who was downstairs watching TV, comes to this wife and attempts to calm her down. The next day, Ryan goes to a group therapy meeting where young people who are dealing with grief meet up and talk about their experiences. Ryan is asked by the host if he is experiencing any symptoms of grief, which he immediately denies. Meanwhile, Grace is back at the hospital, visiting the man who was in the vehicle that crashed into her son's car. The man is still in a coma, and the nurse who is attending to the patient seems to be running out of patience with Grace, though she allows her to stay after Grace gets her a coffee. Grace spots a mother talking with her young son and waves at the boy. Ryan is drinking punch during the therapy group when he is approached by a girl who is of a similar age to him. The girl noticed him when he first stepped into the room, and even smiled at him as he caught her looking at him from the corner of his eye. The girl, whose name is Ashley, advises Ryan not to share his experiences with the group, as they're all grief vultures in her opinion. Ashley reveals that her sister claimed her while in church, and even informs Ryan about what the other members of the group are dealing with. However, she does suggest to Ryan that if he is struggling with his grief, the group is a good place to let it out, and that she's glad that he's here. Back at home, Rose has turned her room into a den. She is documenting her pregnancy in a scrapbook, and she remembers the time she dyed Bennett's hair blue. Bennett asked her if she ever noticed him at school, and Rose didn't answer, instead stating that he was voted best all-round guy at school, so was a well-liked, nice person. Rose asked him how he liked his new hair, and Bennett simply replied that his mother is going to murder him, before noting how pretty Rose was. That evening, the family and Rose are having a meal together. Alan asks Rose if there is anything she is unable to eat due to her pregnancy, that she should tell him. Rose replies that there isn't anything that she can't eat, but rather, she craves burritos from Taco Bell. Alan laughs, stating that Grace craved peanut butter when she was pregnant. Alan asks Ryan if he has plans for tomorrow, to which his son replies that he's planning to go to the movies with some of his friends, which pleases Alan. Ryan then tries to make Rose laugh by showing her a picture he got from a website, by uploading a picture of his brother and herself to see what their child would look like, though this annoys Alan, who asks him to put it away. Grace, in turn, is annoyed by her husband and accuses of him trying to change the subject whenever Bennett's name comes up. Alan denies this, then Grace asks Rose if she dyed her son's hair blue, which Rose admits. Grace looks at her husband, stating that she just wanted to ask a question, almost on the verge of crying. While back at work, Alan is tutoring a student but cannot concentrate. His student leaves, informing Alan that he'll come back tomorrow. Just then, Alan's colleague Joan comes in and asks him if he would have dinner with her at the beach house. Joan states that they used to be friends, and there will be no strings attached, holding Alan's hand. However, Alan moves his hand away from Joan's, stating that Grace loves the beach house. Alan gets up and informs Joan that he cannot speak to her like this anymore, though Joan is displeased, angrily saying that not everything is about Grace as she exits the room. The next day, Alan is determined to take his family to the beach house, asking Ryan to get ready. Ryan agrees to go and asks if he can bring someone, which Alan allows. Then Alan goes into his bedroom, disappointed to see that his wife is rewatching the camera footage of Bennett's car accident. Grace informs her husband that their son was alive for approximately 17 minutes after the collision, and asks him if he's not interested in what happened in those minutes. Alan doesn't answer, instead walking towards the door. Grace asks him if he ever took her, not naming exactly who, to the beach house. Alan immediately denies that he did. The family ends up going to the beach house, with Rose and Ashley along for the trip. Once there, Ryan shows Ashley the room he and Bennett shared. Ashley is surprised by how many trophies are in the room, and Ryan informs her that they all belong to his late brother. Ryan admits that his brother was loved by everyone, and he was good at many things, and that Ashley would have even wanted to date him if she had met him. Ashley denies this, asking Ryan if anyone wanted to date him, and Ryan asks her if she would. Ashley smiles. Meanwhile, Rose seeks out Grace to try to get her advice on giving birth. Grace asks Rose what she would like advice on, and Rose states that she has no idea how to choose a name. Grace replies that she named Bennett after a singer, which Rose quickly jots down in her book. Rose asks Grace if she would like to feel the baby by placing her hand on her stomach, and Grace tries to leave, stating that she is fine. However, before she can leave, Rose stops her, placing her hand on her stomach. Feeling the baby moving inside her deceased son's girlfriend changes Grace's attitude. She admits that she is pleased that Rose seems like the only one who wants to speak to her about Bennett, and Rose replies that she most certainly does, as she has so many questions. Grace takes her leave, saying that she believes Rose should go swimming with Ryan and Ashley. Rose stands there alone, upset that she has no one to speak to. She remembers the first time she ever spoke to Bennett, who approached her on the final day of school. That day Rose was getting late for work, and Bennett stopped her, admitting that he had wanted to speak to her all throughout high school, and finally got the courage to do so on the last day. He asked her if the two of them could walk together to her work so that they had more time to speak, and Rose agreed. Elsewhere, Alan is standing on the beach watching Ryan and Ashley swimming. Just then, a big wave comes, and Ryan is underwater for more time than usual. Alan panics when he doesn't see his son come up immediately, getting ready to jump in the water to save him. Suddenly Ryan comes out and is completely fine, though Alan wants him to come out of the water. Ryan is confused by his father's sudden change in demeanor, while Alan is standing on the beach shouting at the top of his lungs, which turns into pleading with his son to come out of the water, until he is on the verge of tears. Ryan is furious with Alan for embarrassing him in front of Ashley, and marches off back into the beach house. Alan is standing on the beach on his own, when just then, Rose comes up and asks him if he's okay. He jumps up and confirms that he is, even when it's obvious that he's not feeling good at all. Alan tells Rose that if she wants, her mother is also welcome to stay with them. Rose responds that wouldn't be possible, as her mother isn't completely sane, and admits to not having told her that she's pregnant. Alan is surprised by this, but then changes the subject, asking Rose if she would like to catch a movie with him. As they both take their seats in the movie theater, Rose shows Alan her party trick, which involves shrinking a straw with her cheek. Alan is amused, and she asks him if he has any party tricks of his own. He admits that he can't think of any, other than remembering the numbers associated with a person, and reveals that he has memorized all the numbers associated with Rose as well, including her age, her baby's due date, the date and time of when they first met, amongst others. Rose laughs, stating that his party trick is a lot more impressive than her own. Rose and Alan arrive back at the beach house, and Alan sprints inside when he sees a police car parked outside. Alan, now panicked, breathing heavily, asks the police officer what has happened. The officer informs him that he has nothing to worry about, and that Grace just ended up having another mental breakdown at the grocery store and had to be assisted back home. Alan runs to his wife, who is sitting on her own in the backyard, apologizing for not answering his phone as he was at the movies with Rose. Grace is unimpressed with her husband, stating that he should take Rose to a romantic getaway to Paris, while she stays back and mourns her son. This angers Alan, who replies that she is being unfair, and in frustration, carries his wife to the sea and drops her into the water. Alan immediately apologizes as Grace attempts to get back to her feet, embracing his wife, and admitting his feelings for her, that he loves her and only her. The two of them embrace while still in the water, but just then, Grace pushes her husband away, as she spots her son's photo in the wallet she just dropped. The family heads back home, and Grace immediately heads over to the hospital, where she begins reading to the man in the coma, the one responsible for the car accident. However, just as she begins reading, the police, accompanied by some hospital staff, begin moving his bed, informing Grace that he is being moved to a hospital with more security, as he will likely be sent to prison when he finally awakens. Meanwhile, Alan is at home, depressed over how the distance between himself and his wife has grown. Rose comes up to his room, and Alan admits he believes Grace is having an affair. Rose doesn't agree, not believing that Grace would be the type of person to do something like that. Alan admits that he wouldn't blame her if she did, as he did once, likely with Joan. Rose doesn't say anything in response to that, instead asking him if he would like to go to a party with her. Alan and Rose arrive at the party together, which seems to be a party full of college students, which makes Alan uneasy. He also feels as if he's overdressed for the occasion, as he's the only one wearing a suit. Later, some of Rose's friends sign her belly, and she asks Alan if he wants to do so too, and Alan ends up writing a few numbers. She asks him why he doesn't just speak to Grace about Bennett, and Alan admits that he wouldn't know what to do if she were to start crying. Rose then asks if she could speak to him about his son, and that she wouldn't say his name, and Alan agrees to it. She reveals that she first encountered him in a freshman English class, but they didn't speak till the final day of school, even though she was very much interested in him. She begins to cry, admitting that she is determined to keep the baby inside her because she was in love with him. Alan lays down, stating that he's very tired, and closes his eyes. Sometime in the near future, Rose visits the hospital for an ultrasound on her baby, accompanied by Alan and Grace. The doctor informs her that she is due to have a girl, and Rose and Alan are filled with joy. However, Grace is not happy and leaves the room. Alan follows his wife into the waiting room, asking her what her issue is. Grace apologizes, stating that she knows she sounds horrible, but she hasn't accepted Rose or her baby, stating that she believes that if Bennett was alive, she wouldn't have kept it. This annoys Alan, who informs his wife that he is tired of listening to her unreasonable statements. Grace in turn accuses her husband of having no empathy for their son, not even being able to shed a tear for Bennett. Alan states that he believes that he has to stay strong for their family, as others need their attention, though Grace just apologizes for admitting that a new baby doesn't soften the blow of losing her beloved son. However, Alan admits that it does so for him, which shocks Grace. Unknowing to them, Rose is outside the waiting room, and Grace voices her feelings that she blames Rose for her son's loss, even going as far as shouting that Rose should have been the one to perish that night, not her son. Meanwhile, Ryan arrives at Ashley's house, and is surprised to see a young girl similar in age to her answer the door. Ryan asks the girl's name, and she informs him that her name is Amy, the same Amy who is supposedly the same sister of Ashley's who claimed her. Just then, Ashley runs downstairs and tries to persuade the now furious Ryan that she can explain why she lied about the demise of her sister. However, Ryan doesn't want to hear any of her explanations, demanding she open the gate, and angrily walks to his car. When he arrives home, Ryan is upset and ends up taking some pills he had hidden under his mattress. Grace arrives back home and is furious with her husband, who has had the cleaner tidy Bennett's room. Grace is enraged that Alan has tried to erase her son, and Alan points to his chest, that Bennett is inside his heart. She storms out of the room, but just then Alan falls to the floor, clutching his chest and in extreme pain. Alan is taken to hospital, and Grace spends the night by her husband's side, and luckily, he has avoided a heart attack. The doctor explains to Grace that Alan has likely been under extreme stress, and that can mimic heart attack symptoms. Later, Ryan arrives at a group therapy meeting, and he immediately asks if he can share. The group host agrees, and Ryan states that he didn't think highly of his brother, and instead envied the attention he got. However, he then pauses, breaks down in tears, and admits that he's lying. Ryan continues to cry and talk, stating that he loved his brother more than anything, that he misses him, and feels deep regret that he never got the chance to say goodbye. The next day, Grace goes to the prison where the man in the coma, Jordan, has been moved. Grace comes into the hospital room and is surprised to see Jordan has awoken from his coma, handcuffed to his bed. She immediately walks over to him asking if they can talk, as he was the last person to speak to Bennett before he passed. However, Jordan isn't too pleased to see her, informing her that he intends to sue her and her family, as the accident wasn't his fault. Grace doesn't care about that, saying that all she wants to know is what he and Bennett spoke about before he passed. Jordan is confused, but agrees to tell her when he sees that Grace is crying. He reveals that he asked Bennett not to worry about the crash, and that when he saw the sirens, everything was going to be all right. He also goes into detail on how badly damaged Bennett's body was, and admits he was crying, as he was scared. Grace begins crying more, and asks if he called out to her before he passed. Jordan revealed that he didn't, and Bennett was solely concerned for Rose, as he didn't know if she was alive. Meanwhile, Rose goes to see her friend from work, and asks if she can speak to her mother for her. She calls her mother from her cell phone, and reveals to her that her daughter is pregnant, and planning to keep the baby. Rosa stood there, extremely nervous about what her mother's reaction to the news is going to be. Instead of congratulating her daughter, Rosa's mother informs her that she has lost her job, and that she can come and help her if she were to obtain a $10,000 payment from Bennett's family. At the hospital, Alan is sat up ready to be discharged when Grace comes in. He asks her if she went to speak to Jordan, which she admits to. Alan asks his wife what she learned from him, and she admits that Bennett did indeed love Rose, as he called out for her rather than his mother. Alan nods, as he states that he calls for Grace every day, and breaks down in tears, crying for his boy. Grace immediately embraces her husband, who has finally had the time to cry for his loss. Alan is sobbing uncontrollably, exclaiming that he could have saved his boy had he been there, that he had 17 minutes to save his son, had he been there when he needed him most. Grace attempts to calm her husband down, telling him that their son didn't suffer, and that he passed on impact. Alan holds his wife, asking her to accept Rose and that she has to stay with them, and Grace finally agrees. When the two of them get home, they find Ryan in the kitchen, drawing maps of where Rose may have possibly gone. Rose left their home after the ultrasound appointment and hasn't returned. The three of them go to She's workplace, and Alan asks her if she knows where Rose went, as they're very worried about her. She doesn't know, however, she advises them to check the site of the Bennett's accident, as she goes there often. The three of them arrive at the site of the accident, and as Grace is tidying the flowers people have left behind for her son, they see Rose get off a bus. Alan and Grace call out to Rose, but she ignores them and walks into the woods. Rose asks them to leave her, and that the baby is fine. She emphasizes that she's had enough of their family, and they each have their issues to deal with before she can even think about raising her child in their home. Grace approaches Rose, apologizing for all she has said and the way she has treated her. Rose states that she feels like she hardly knew Bennett, and wants to talk to them about him so she can know him better. In the car, Rose demands that the three of them tell her more about Bennett while she goes into labor. Rose struggles with the pain, as she keeps demanding to know more and more about Bennett. Grace, Ryan, and even Alan remember all the happy memories they have of him. Once at the hospital, Rose is taken in as the baby is due at any moment, accompanied by Grace, who is holding her hand. Alan and Ryan wait in the waiting room, and after a while, a nurse comes out and informs them that Rose has chosen to give her daughter the name Ruby, the same name that Alan chose had Bennett been born a girl. Grace, Alan, and Ryan watch on, smiling, as Rose looks back at them holding the newest member of their family in her arms, the daughter of the son and brother they have just lost, named Ruby. In the closing scene, we see Bennett in high school, looking at his watch to wait for Rose's class to end so he can say hi to her.